Hi, everyone. I'm Thérèse, and this is New York Girl Again, The After, the podcast for caregivers who have survived the hardest chapter of their lives and are now gathering both the courage and the strength to write the next one. This week, we're continuing our Women and Caregiving series, shining a light on the millions of women who carry extraordinary responsibility for the people they love. Last week, on International Women's Day, we talked about the invisible strength of women caregivers. So today, I want to talk about something far less discussed. What happens to the caregiver after caregiving ends? Because when the caregiving chapter closes and the world moves on, you're left with a question that is so enormous that it takes your breath away. Who am I now? Caregiving is not just something you do. Over time, it becomes who you are. It becomes your identity. Your days revolve around the needs of the person you are caring for. The appointments, medications, the phone calls, doctor visits, emergencies, the schedules, and the constant vigilance. Your mind is always scanning. Did they take their medication? Are they safe? Do they need something? Are they in pain? What happens if I'm not there? Eventually, caregiving stops feeling like a responsibility. It becomes an identity. You become the strong one, the reliable one, the person who always shows up, the person who handles it all. Former First Lady Rosalind Carter, one of the most influential voices in caregiving advocacy, once said, "There are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers." Caregiving, in other words, is weaved into every aspect of society. It's part of the human condition. But what makes caregiving so powerful is that it reshapes not just our schedules and priorities, but our sense of purpose. For years, you wake up knowing exactly why you are needed. Your presence matters. Your actions have immediate consequences. But when caregiving ends, the role that structured your life disappears, and the silence that follows can feel deeply disorienting. I remember coming home from my dad's burial. My dad was the last leg of my 25-year caregiving journey. And when I got home, I remember literally spending the next week in bed, thinking, where do I even go from here? So let's talk about this identity crisis. Psychologists have a term for this experience. They call it role exit. It happens when a role that once defined our lives suddenly ends. It happens when people retire from long careers. It happens when parents experience the empty nest. And it happens very powerfully when caregivers step out of the caregiving role. Because caregiving does not just organize your calendar, it organizes your meaning. For years, someone depended on you. And when that dependence ends, many caregivers experience something unique: freedom mixed with deep emptiness. Caregiving often forces us to grow in ways we never imagined. But when caregiving ends, the challenge becomes different. We must learn to redefine ourselves again. in baby steps. So how do caregivers begin to reclaim themselves? Rebuilding identity after caregiving requires a different kind of courage. Not the courage to endure, but the courage to reclaim yourself. Author Brené Brown writes, "Owning our story and loving ourselves through that process is the bravest thing we will ever do." Caregivers often spend years writing their lives around someone else's needs. The after is the moment when we begin writing our own story again. This doesn't happen all at once. Identity rebuilds slowly, choice by choice, step by step. Which brings me to today. If you're listening to this on Sunday morning, March 15th, 2026, I'm on my way to run the New York City Half Marathon. Not to win, but to challenge myself. I've been in the after of caregiving for 5 years now. And running has taught me something about rebuilding life after difficult chapters. You don't go from standing still to running 13 miles. You start with one step, then another. Strength rebuilds gradually. Confidence rebuilds gradually. And your identity rebuilds gradually. The same is true after caregiving. You do not need to reinvent your entire life overnight. You simply begin moving forward again. So if you're navigating your own after, if caregiving has ended and you are quietly wondering what your life looks like now, please know this. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are rebuilding yourself. Caregiving may have shaped you, but it does not define the limits of your future. Sometimes the strongest women in the world are the ones who quietly decide to begin again, to start over. I'm Thérèse, and this is New York Girl Again, the after. And wherever you are in your journey, I'm so glad you're here with me.